The cold bit through my bones that Christmas Eve, but it wasn't the winter air that chilled me. It was the sound of my own daughter-in-law's voice cutting like a knife. Snow crunched beneath my slippers as I stood on the porch, clutching the handle of a little worn-out suitcase. Behind me, the glow of Christmas lights from the neighborhood twinkled so bright, yet my heart sank heavy with shame. This is my house now. "You don't belong here, old woman," she shouted, her words sharp enough to split me in two. I looked toward my son, my Marcus, hoping for even a whisper of defense. But he just stood in the doorway, eyes downcast, lips sealed, letting his wife's venom drip unchecked. Curtains shifted across the street, neighbors watched like it was a holiday spectacle, my humiliation, the evening's entertainment. Anger burned beneath my sorrow. Betrayal like that leaves a mark you can't wash away. But she didn't know, this old woman had more fight left in her than she could ever imagine. Stay with me, baby, because you ain't heard nothing yet. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. My name is Thelma Johnson, 72 years old, born and raised right here in Georgia, and I've lived in this house for more than 40 years. When I say this place holds my blood, sweat, and tears, I mean it. Every corner of these walls carries the sound of my late husband's laughter, the steps of my little boy growing into a man, and the whispers of my prayers through hard nights. This ain't just a house to me, it's my whole life wrapped in wood and brick. Most mornings, you'll find me in my kitchen humming a gospel tune while the collard greens simmer down in the pot. I still make sweet potato pies the way my mama taught me, with nutmeg and brown sugar, crust rolled thin by hand. Cornbread? Baby, I don't even measure anymore, it's all in my wrist and my spirit. Wednesday nights are for Bible study down at Mount Olive, where I've been a member since I was baptized at 12. Sundays, you'll hear my voice blending with the choir, singing old hymns that kept our people standing strong long before I was born. Evenings, I like to pull my quilt over my lap, switch on the 6 o'clock news, and let the anchors talk while I sip my tea. Sometimes I'll step out on the porch with my neighbors, Miss Ruth across the street and Deacon Harris from the corner. We sit, rocking in our chairs, swapping little stories about our aches, our grandkids, or the price of groceries going up again. That porch has seen more laughter and comfort than most places in this town. But the real heartbeat of my life is my son Marcus. Lord knows I poured everything I had into that boy after his daddy passed. My husband Earl died when Marcus was just 15, heart attack, sudden and cruel. I worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and working the school cafeteria by day, just to keep this roof over our heads and shoes on Marcus's feet. He was my reason for pushing through, and I swore on Earl's grave that I'd see Marcus become a man who never had to struggle the way I did. And for a long while, he was just that. My sweet boy, my mama's boy. He used to sit in my kitchen eating biscuits straight from the oven, telling me all his dreams. He went off to college, made me so proud walking across that stage, got himself a good job, a steady career. For a while, I thought all the sacrifices had paid off. Then came Candace. Pretty young woman, sharp tongue, always dressed like she was heading to a magazine cover shoot. Marcus fell hard for her, and I wanted to be happy for him. I really did. First time he brought her over for Sunday dinner, she sat at my table in her high heels, tapping her nails on the wood, and smiled at me like she already owned the place. I remember offering her some of my collard greens, and she wrinkled her nose. "Oh, I don't really eat this kind of food." "Too greasy." She said it sweet, but the words sliced clean. Marcus laughed nervously, tried to change the subject, but I felt something shift in that moment. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just a young woman not used to Southern ways. But as the years passed, those little comments piled up like bricks. "Your house is so old-fashioned. Marcus, don't you think your mama should think about moving into a smaller place? We could do so much more with this space if it wasn't so cluttered with family stuff." She always said it with a laugh, like she was joking. But I could see in her eyes she wasn't joking at all, And Marcus, my sweet boy, he just let it slide. Love makes men blind sometimes. Still, I swallowed it. I prayed about it. I told myself patience would smooth things out. When they had kids, my grandbabies, Isaiah and little Jasmine, I thought for sure Candace would soften, but even then she acted like my love was too much, too old-fashioned. Yet those children knew where their safe place was. They'd run into my kitchen after school begging for cookies, begging for stories about when their daddy was young. Jasmine loved to sit on my lap while I braided her hair and told her how her granddaddy Earl used to sing to her daddy every night. Isaiah, bold as ever, loved my fried chicken and said nobody cooked better than Grandma Thelma. Those babies loved me without hesitation, and I held on to that like treasure. This past Christmas, I wanted to do what I always did, make the season bright with love and tradition. I got up early Christmas Eve morning, put on my apron, and started my feast. Ham glazed with honey and pineapple, bubbling macaroni and cheese, green beans slow-cooked with smoked turkey wings, cornbread in the skillet, and peach cobbler cooling on the windowsill. I wanted the whole house to smell like comfort, like memories, like family. But Candace had other ideas. She breezed through the kitchen in her designer sweater, her hair slicked back like she was stepping onto a stage. "Oh, Thelma, you're really making all this heavy food? People don't eat this way anymore." "We need something lighter." I just kept stirring my gravy, biting my tongue. I told her, "Baby, this is Christmas. My family eats soul food on Christmas, and that's the way it's always been." She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Well, maybe it's time for new traditions. Don't you think, Marcus?" And Marcus, my son, my only child, the boy I raised with everything I had, he just smiled weakly and said nothing. That silence, that look on his face, told me everything. My baby boy was slipping away, further than I ever thought possible. Looking back now, I see all the warning signs. The little digs about my age, the way she sighed when I bowed my head to pray before meals, the way she shifted her body whenever I tried to hug Marcus, like she wanted to put herself between us. I felt the chill long before the snow fell outside that Christmas Eve. And yet, I never imagined it would come to what it did, that she would throw me out of my own house, suitcase in hand, with the whole neighborhood watching. But that night, on that porch, I realized something I hadn't in years. Candace might have thought she won, but I still had more power than she could dream. Because this house wasn't just mine in memory, it was mine in name. And Lord help me, I was about to remind her of that fact. The table was set just the way I'd always done it, red tablecloth with the lace trim, the good china I only pulled out on holidays, and the big silver platter in the center holding my glazed ham. Steam curled up from the macaroni and cheese, golden brown with the cheese bubbling on top. The peach cobbler sat on the sideboard, its buttery crust dusted with cinnamon, filling the whole room with sweetness. I had laid out the cornbread in a basket, wrapped in a white cloth to keep it warm. Christmas Eve, to me, meant more than just food. It meant tradition. It meant family sitting around the table, giving thanks, telling stories, laughing over memories of the ones we lost. It meant showing my grandbabies what love looks like when it's passed down from generation to generation. Marcus came down first, smelling the ham before he even hit the kitchen. He smiled, but it was faint, not the big grin I remembered from his boyhood when the smell of sweet potato pie would light up his whole face. He kissed me on the cheek and muttered, "Smells good, Mama." But even as he said it, his eyes darted toward the staircase. He was waiting for her, and then she appeared, Candace floating into the room like she was walking a runway. Her sweater sparkled with silver threads, her makeup was perfect, her perfume too sharp for my liking. She gave me a once-over, her eyes stopping at my apron dusted with flour, then landed on the table. Her lips curled, and she let out a little laugh that sliced through my heart. "We don't eat all this greasy food anymore," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, her hand on her hip. "Do we, Marcus?" Marcus cleared his throat but said nothing, just pulled out a chair and sat down, fiddling with his phone like he couldn't hear the tension already brewing. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile and answered, Baby, this is Christmas. This is the way we've always done it. Collard greens, ham, macaroni, it's tradition. Candace rolled her eyes. Tradition doesn't mean healthy. People move on, Thelma. Times change. Isaiah and Jasmine came running in then, their little voices breaking the silence for a moment. Grandma, did you make the cobbler? Jasmine squealed, climbing into her chair. I smell it. I want the first piece. Isaiah grinned wide, rubbing his stomach. Nobody makes it like Grandma, not even Mama. I chuckled softly and kissed the top of Jasmine's head, but the glare Candace shot across the table nearly froze me solid. Her children's love for me was a thorn she couldn't pull out, and I knew it burned her every time they chose me over her in these small, innocent ways. Dinner began, but the peace didn't last. Candace picked at her plate, pushing food around like a child, and then smirked as she set her fork down. You know, Marcus, I was telling you, we should really start doing Christmas dinner somewhere nicer. Like a restaurant. Somewhere modern. This whole homemade thing feels so outdated. My hands tightened around my fork, but I said nothing. She wasn't done. She looked straight at me and said, "And honestly, I don't know how you still eat like this at your age. Isn't it bad for your blood pressure? Maybe that's why you're always tired. Don't you think it's time to, take it easy?" Marcus stared down at his plate. My own son wouldn't meet my eyes. I felt the sting behind my eyelids, but I refused to let tears fall at my own table. I straightened in my chair, laid my fork down gently and looked at her. I may be 72, but I can still cook circles around you. And I've been keeping myself and this family fed long before you even knew Marcus's name. Candace snorted. Fed? Sure, but maybe if Marcus didn't grow up eating all this fried food, he wouldn't have that little gut now. Candace, Marcus hissed, finally looking up. But instead of defending me, his voice sounded more like a warning to her to quiet down, not because he disagreed, but because he didn't want a scene. My heart cracked a little more. Isaiah and Jasmine stopped chewing, their eyes darting back and forth between us like they were watching a tennis match they didn't understand. Jasmine whispered, "Grandma, are you okay?" And my chest swelled with both pain and pride. Candace saw it and pounced, her voice rising sharp. "Don't baby her, Jasmine." "Grandma is just fine. She's always been dramatic." I leaned back in my chair, my jaw tight, but she wasn't finished. "You know what bothers me most?" Candace said, crossing her arms. "You act like this is still your house. Like you're doing us a favor. But let's be real, Thelma. You're just living here for free. This isn't your house anymore." The words dropped like a stone into the room. Silence followed, so heavy I could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I turned to Marcus, desperate for him to stand up, to say something, to tell his wife she was wrong. But all he did was lower his head, shame written across his face. I pressed my palm flat against the table, my voice trembling but firm. "That's a lie. I paid every single mortgage note with your daddy, God rest his soul. We built this home together. Every dollar came from our sweat, not yours, Candace, not Marcus's either." Candace smirked, her red lipstick catching the glow of the Christmas lights. "Oh, Thelma, memories don't pay bills. Times change, families change. You should be grateful we've let you stay here this long." Marcus closed his eyes like he couldn't bear to see what was happening, but still, he said nothing. My son, my flesh and blood, the boy I raised from the ground up, sat there in silence while his wife stripped me of dignity at my own table. Isaiah pushed his chair back suddenly, his small voice breaking. "I don't like this," he whispered. Jasmine clung to his arm, her little eyes glassy with confusion. My appetite was gone. My Christmas was gone. The food I'd poured my love into sat untouched, the ham cooling, the cobbler forgotten. The room felt colder than the snow outside, and all I could think was how fast joy can turn into sorrow. Christmas Eve was supposed to be about family, about love and togetherness. But in that moment, all I felt was betrayal pressing down on me like a weight I might not shake off. And as I sat there, staring at the woman who dared to erase my sacrifices and at the son who let her, I realized the truth. This Christmas had been ruined, but the fight for my place in this house, my house, was only beginning. I went upstairs that night with a heaviness in my bones that no winter cold could match. My body felt tired, but it was my heart that carried the real weight. I closed the door to my room softly, not wanting the children to hear me break, not wanting anyone to see the tears that had been threatening to fall since Candace opened her mouth at that table. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the quilt I had stitched by hand years ago folded neatly across it, and I finally let myself go. The tears came hot and steady, sliding down the lines of my face, soaking into the front of my nightgown. For all my strength, for all the years I had carried this family on my back, that moment felt like the loneliest one of my life. I pressed my hands together, fell to my knees right there beside the bed and whispered into the quiet, "Lord, give me strength. I don't know how much more I can take, but you do. And you know my heart." My knees ached on the hardwood, but I stayed there a while, whispering prayers through the sobs, clinging to the only comfort that had never failed me. When I rose, I wiped my face with the hem of my apron, and I reached for the old photo album that stayed tucked on my nightstand. The leather cover was worn, edges frayed, pages loose, but it held my whole life inside. I opened it slowly, flipping past black and white pictures of my parents, then wedding photos of me and Earl. Lord Earl had been a strong man, tall and broad, with a smile that could light up the darkest room. Seeing his face again frozen in those pictures, I felt a pang deep in my chest. I whispered, "Oh, Earl, if only you were here to see what's become of us." I turned the page and saw younger Marcus, maybe 10 years old, standing on the front porch in overalls, holding a basketball bigger than his head. His smile was wide, unafraid, unburdened. Tears blurred my eyes again, because that boy felt so far away from the man who sat silently at the table tonight, letting his wife humiliate me. My sweet boy had turned into someone I barely recognized. Tucked in the back sleeve of that album, beneath the pictures, were old folded papers, the original deed to the house. Earl and I had kept it safe all these years, and I traced the faded ink with my finger. My name was right there, written clear. It wasn't just memory holding me here, it was law. That paper, those signatures, meant something. Candace's words echoed, "You're just living here for free. This isn't your house." But I knew, deep in my soul, she was wrong. Still, knowing the truth didn't stop me from feeling the sting. My own son hadn't spoken up for me. My grandbabies had seen their mama disrespect me in ways that cut deep, and all of it on Christmas Eve. I laid the album aside and turned off the lamp, but I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark listening to the faint sound of Christmas carols from a radio somewhere outside, and I wondered how the world could sound so joyful when my heart was breaking. It was around 9 o'clock when I heard a soft knock on my window. I pulled the curtain back and saw Miss Ruth standing in her coat holding a pie dish wrapped in foil. I went to the door and opened it quick, pulling her inside before the cold snatched the warmth from the room. "Thelma," she said gently, her voice full of concern, "I saw what happened tonight. Whole neighborhood did. You don't deserve that kind of treatment." Her words nearly undid me again, but I kept my chin up. "Come on in, Ruth. Sit a spell." She set the pie on the table, sweet potato, still warm. "I thought you might need a little comfort. You've always been there for me. Now let me be here for you." We sat at my little table, two old women sharing quiet comfort, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel completely alone. Ruth reached across the table, laid her hand on mine, and said, "Don't you let that girl break you. You're stronger than she knows. And don't forget, you and Earl built this place. Nobody can take that from you." Her words stirred something inside me, something I had nearly forgotten. The fire that had carried me through losing Earl, through raising Marcus on my own, through all the nights I worked double shifts to keep this roof over our heads. I had been through worse storms than Candace. After Ruth left, I sat a little taller. I cut myself a small slice of pie, let the sweet, spiced filling sit on my tongue, and for the first time that night, I tasted hope. The phone rang not long after, and when I picked it up, I heard Pastor Green's warm voice. "Merry Christmas Eve, Sister Thelma," he said. "I just wanted to check on you." The Lord put it on my heart to call. I nearly broke right there on the line, but I steadied myself. "Thank you, Pastor. It means more than you know." We prayed together, his voice low and steady, reminding me that God never leaves his children. When I hung up, I felt a peace I hadn't had all day. As I crawled back into bed, pulling the quilt over me, a memory rose up. Something Earl had told me years ago, right after we paid off the house. He had looked at me with that serious look he got when he meant business and said, "Thelma, always keep the original deed in your name. People change, times change, but this house is yours. Promise me you'll protect it." I had promised. And now, lying there with the papers still tucked in the photo album, I realized that promise was about to be tested. Candace thought she held the power because Marcus was under her spell. But she didn't know what Earl and I had built. She didn't know the strength of the roots planted deep in this house. And as I drifted off to a light sleep, one thought carried me through. I might feel broken tonight, but I was not beaten. Tomorrow would come, and with it, a chance to remind everyone, especially Candace, just whose house this truly was. Candace didn't wait for the dishes to be cleared or the children to be tucked in. It was like she'd been holding a match all evening, waiting for the smallest breeze to flicker it into flame. I was wiping the counter, still in my apron, when she marched back into the kitchen with that sharp clack of her heels and a face set like stone. "Pack your things," she snapped, voice icy and bright. "Get out now." The rag slid from my hand. For a moment I thought I heard her wrong. I turned, slow, because I wanted to give the Lord time to hush my temper. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, louder this time, chin tilted high like a judge pronouncing sentence. "I will not have you ruining another holiday. You've done enough. Take your little suitcase and go." I looked past her to where Marcus stood in the doorway, halfway between the dining room and the hall, a man caught in his own shadow. His eyes met mine for a half second, my son, my baby, and then fled to the floor. My voice, Lord, it came out softer than I felt. "Marcus?" He rubbed the back of his neck, cleared his throat, and failed to find words. He didn't step forward. He didn't step anywhere. Candace laughed without a smile. "See? He agrees with me. We need peace in this house, and you are not peace." She tapped the counter with a long red nail. "Go pack." In the living room, the tree lights blinked polite little twinkles, ignorant of the storm. From the hallway came the small sound of Jasmine's whisper and Isaiah's hushed, worried shushing. My stomach twisted. "I won't be put out of my own home," I said, but my voice shook. "I paid the notes on this house with your daddy until the day the bank stamped paid in full." Candace rolled her eyes like she was bored. "Stories, stories. Memories are not paperwork. You're living here because we let you. And now I'm unletting you." She crossed her arms. "You have 10 minutes. The way she said it, flat, casual, felt worse than if she'd screamed. I looked at Marcus again. Anything. A word. A hand. But he just shifted his weight like his shoes were heavy. "Candace," he said, my name not on his lips. "Maybe we should cool down." She pivoted that glare onto him and he shrank a full inch. "No, we have cooled down for months." "We are done cooling." Then back to me. "Move." I thought of all the Christmas Eves I'd known in this house, the one where Earl and I put together a lopsided tricycle with half the screws left over. The one when teenage Marcus swore he'd heard reindeer hooves, and I let him keep believing just a little longer. The one I walked the floors alone the year Earl died, clutching a Bible like a life preserver in a black ocean. The years stretch and fold, joy and grief laid down like quilts on this floor, and here I stood, told to leave by a woman who thought a deed was the same as permission. I nodded once, because dignity sometimes looks like quiet. "All right," I said. "I'll pack a bag." Candace blinked, surprised it was that easy. As I walked past Marcus, I laid a hand on his arm. He flinched like my touch burned. "Mama," he murmured, eyes still on the floor, It's late. Maybe just stay at Miss Ruth's tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word landed in my chest like a stone. Upstairs, in the soft darkness of my room, I pulled out the little brown suitcase I had owned for decades, knit scarves poking from its corners like it remembered every bus trip I ever took to visit cousins, every funeral, every choir convention. I put in a few dresses, my warm coat, my church shoes wrapped in tissue. I folded my quilt, not the company one, but the one with Earl's old work shirt sewn in crooked squares, and tucked it on top. My fingers trembled when they brushed the photo album. For a heartbeat, I reached toward the back sleeve where the folded papers slept like a promise, but I stopped. Not yet. Not this way. When I came down, the house felt wrong, like the furniture was holding its breath. Candace stood at the foot of the stairs with her arms folded, a queen surveying an eviction. Marcus hovered behind her, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Isaiah and Jasmine were peeking from the hallway, eyes wide and wet. "Children," I said gently, "Grandma's going to visit Miss Ruth across the street tonight." Jasmine pushed past her father and ran into me, small arms tight around my waist. "I want to go with you." "Oh, baby," Candace chirped, sweet as poison tea, "Grandma needs to rest." She made herself very tired tonight. She pried Jasmine loose and shooed Isaiah back with a look. "Say goodnight." Isaiah swallowed hard and said, "Good night, Grandma." His voice cracked on the last syllable. I bent and kissed both their foreheads, tasting salt. "Good night, my loves." "I'll see you soon." Candace breezed to the door and swung it wide. The night pushed in, cold and silver, a slice of moon, snow lying soft on the walk. Somewhere on the block, a radio crooned a carol, gentle and steady as faith. I lifted my suitcase and stepped onto the porch. Neighbors had a way of knowing when something was wrong. Miss Ruth's living room lamp glowed warm through her curtains, and across the street Mr. Prowse. Ellis's silhouette lingered at his window. The McCrae's door cracked open, just a sliver, 2 eyes blinking out. A hush fell over the whole block, as though even the wind paused to listen. Candace leaned in the doorway, framed by my Christmas wreath. "Merry Christmas," she said blandly, and closed the door with a click that echoed through my ribs. I stood there for a moment, the cold touching my face like a slap. Snow crunched under my slippers as I started down the steps. I walked slow, not because my legs were weak, but because I wanted to feel each inch, to mark the path I was being forced to take. The suitcase handle cut into my palm. I kept my back straight. 2 doors down, a whisper tracked me. "Lord have mercy." On Christmas. Another voice, softer, "A shame, a shame." Windows were picture frames and we were the moving scene, and I hated that my pain had an audience. But I understood too. Folks watch because it makes them remember to be careful with their own. Before I reached the sidewalk, Miss Ruth's door opened wide and she was already halfway down her steps, her coat thrown over a house dress, slippers damp with snow. "Thelma," she called, arms reaching. "Come on, honey." I couldn't speak at first. She took the suitcase from me like it weighed nothing and tucked me under her arm, steering me up her steps and into her living room. The warmth hit my face and I had to breathe through it. Her house smelled of cinnamon and pine sol, and a gospel station hummed low from the kitchen radio. "Sit," she ordered softly, pressing me onto her floral sofa. She brought me a glass of water, then a warm towel for my shaking hands. "I saw," she said simply. "We all saw. That girl," she stopped herself, patted my knee. "You're here now." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I didn't want the children to see me cry," I said, and then the tears came anyway. They ran quiet, the way rain can fall on a still day. Miss Ruth sat beside me and let me lean into her shoulder like a sister does when words can't help. When the storm passed, I wiped my face and sat up taller. The room felt solid in that way only a friend's home can feel. Chairs that have held you through death notices, tables that have heard secrets and jokes and prayers. I reached down and popped the suitcase clasps, lifted the lid and pulled out my photo album. Its leather spine creaked like an old pew. Ruth frowned, soft with worry. You don't have to think on it right now. I do, I said. My voice surprised me, steady as oak. Because tonight wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. I opened to the back sleeve and slid out the folded papers, the ones I had touched earlier and left behind, the ones that had slept years beneath pictures of joy and grief. I smoothed them on my lap, the light from Ruth's lamp shining on familiar lines. She leaned in, breath held. "The deed?" I said. "The original deed to my house?" I tapped the signatures, mine and Earl's. It was never transferred. Not to Marcus, certainly not to her. Ruth's eyes flashed, part triumph, part fury on my behalf. "You kept it all these years?" Earl made me promise. I could hear him then, that gravel-warm voice in my ear. "Always keep it in your name, Thelma. People change." Paper remembers. I put a copy with Mr. Daniels, too. You know, my lawyer from the choir? He said, "Sister Thelma, as long as this stands, your roof stands." Ruth's smile broke through, small but fierce. "Then your roof stands." I let out a breath that felt like I'd been holding it since Candace's first insult. Hope rose up in me, not the soft, wishful kind, but the kind with bones, the kind that can lift a woman back to her feet. Outside, snow went on, laying its quiet blanket over the block, but inside me a different stillness settled, the stillness right before March begins. Ruth squeezed my hand. "What you gonna do?" I folded the deed like a prayer and slid it back into the album. "What I was always meant to do," I said. "I'm going to take back my house." Ruth leaned back, a satisfied nod, as if she'd been waiting for me to say it. "You want me with you?" "I want the truth with me," I answered. "And the truth is written down." We sat together a long minute, the radio crooning a hymn beneath the hush. In my mind, I saw the front door to my home, the wreath I'd hung with my own hands, the glow of lights I'd wrapped around windows Earl painted himself. I pictured Candace's face when paper stronger than her pride touched that table. I pictured Marcus's eyes when he remembered whose name steadied his childhood. Outside, a wind gust lifted and rattled Miss Ruth's eaves, then quieted. I pressed my palm to the album cover, feeling the ridge of folded paper underneath, the proof of a life built brick by brick. "Tomorrow," I said, more to myself than to Ruth, "we go home. And that's where I'll leave you for now, baby, on the edge of night, with the cold outside and the warm truth in my hands." Because for all her noise, Candace never knew the one thing that mattered most. The house she tried to push me from already had my name stitched into its bones. The morning light filtered soft through Miss Ruth's lace curtains, painting the room in pale gold. I hadn't slept much, my mind running in circles around Candace's voice, the children's wide eyes, and the slam of that front door. But one thought pressed steady in my chest. It was time to call in help. After breakfast, Ruth walked with me down the block to Mr. Pry's. Daniels's office. His law practice sat above the barber shop, a little two-room space with the same wooden desk he'd had since the 70s. He was a tall man now in his late 60s, hair silvered at the temples, voice slow and deliberate like every word weighed something. "Thelma," he said as I sat down across from him, "I heard some talk about last night." He folded his hands on the desk, eyes full of concern. "What happened?" I laid the folded papers on the wood between us, my fingers trembling just slightly. "She told me to pack up and get out, Daniels. On Christmas Eve. In front of my son. In front of my grandbabies." My throat tightened, but I pressed on. "But this?" I tapped the deed. "This says she don't have the right." He opened the papers carefully, eyes scanning the lines he'd seen years ago. A slow smile spread across his face. "That's right. The house is in your name, Thelma. Always has been. No one, not Marcus, not Candace, has any legal claim. You're the sole owner." Relief washed through me, hot and sudden, but it burned with anger, too. So all this time, she strutted around like she was queen of the castle when she's been living here under my grace? "Mister?" Daniels nodded. "That's the truth. Candace has no rights here, not a one. And if she tries to push you out again, we'll make sure the law reminds her." He tapped the papers, then looked me square in the eye. "Thelma, you're not powerless. You never were." Something in me straightened. I thought about all the nights I'd cried in silence, all the times I'd bit my tongue to keep the peace. I thought about Marcus sitting silent while his wife threw me out like trash. A fire caught hold inside me, strong and steady. "I'm taking back my house," I said firmly, my voice echoing off those little office walls. "And I'm not waiting for permission, Mr." Daniels leaned back with a satisfied nod. "Then you let me know if you want me there when you do." I gathered the papers carefully, sliding them into my purse like sacred scripture. When I walked out of that office, the air felt different, crisper, sharper, full of possibility. Back at Ruth's, we sat at her kitchen table drinking coffee while I laid out my plan. "They think they humiliated me," I said, "but tomorrow, when the rest of the family and half the neighborhood is gathered for Christmas dinner, I'm going to walk back in with the truth in my hand. Let her laugh then. Let her roll her eyes then." Ruth's lips curved into a fierce smile. "You can remind them who built that house?" I nodded. "Exactly. My Earl laid the first coat of paint on those walls. I made every mortgage payment with my own hands. That home is mine, and I'll be damned if I let Candace rewrite history in front of my grandchildren." All through the day, as Ruth's radio played carols and her oven warmed the room, I kept rehearsing in my mind. Not anger, not shouting, that wasn't my way, but steady truth, delivered clear, with the whole community as witness. That evening, as the sun slipped low and lights blinked on in every window down the street, I packed my purse. The photo album with Earl's smile. The folded deed, edges worn but words still strong, the memory of last night's shame. And above it all, the promise of tomorrow's justice. When I stepped out onto Ruth's porch, the air cut sharp against my cheeks. Across the street, my house glowed with Christmas lights, the tree shining through the front window, voices carrying faint on the night air. Candace thought she had silenced me, but she didn't know. With each step I took toward those stairs, the weight of years fell away. My heart beat steady. Tomorrow, the truth comes home. Christmas Day dawned bright and sharp, the air so cold it stung my lungs when I breathed it in. I dressed slow that morning in Miss Ruth's guest room, taking care with every piece I put on. A deep plum dress, ironed crisp, the one Earl always said made me look like royalty. My church shoes polished till they gleamed. I tied a silk scarf around my hair, smooth and neat. Dignity had to come dressed proper. Before I left, I slipped the photo album into my purse, the folded deed tucked inside like a weapon sharper than any knife. Ruth walked me to the door, her hand on my arm. "You sure you ready?" I looked her in the eye and felt the steel rise up in me. I was born ready. "I've been preparing for this fight since the day Earl signed that paper." She squeezed my hand. "Then go on and claim what's yours." The walk back across the street felt different than the one I'd taken last night. No suitcase in my hand this time, no shame pressing down on my back. Just the sound of my heels tapping firm on the frozen pavement and my chin lifted high. Curtains twitched again, neighbors peeking like before, but this time I didn't care. Let them see. Let them witness. The house glowed with Christmas lights, the tree shining through the window, ornaments I'd collected over decades still hanging from its branches. I stepped up the stairs, each board creaking familiar beneath me, and knocked once before turning the knob. This was my house. I didn't need an invitation. Inside, the table was set again, this time by Candace's hand. The ham I cooked last night sat carved, though it looked mangled compared to how I would have sliced it. New dishes were scattered among mine, fancy salads with greens no one in my family ever asked for, plates of store-bought rolls still wrapped in foil. The family sat stiff in their chairs, Marcus at the head, shoulders hunched, the children with eyes darting between plates and faces, a couple of cousins who'd come by for the holiday, murmuring polite conversation that couldn't hide the tension. And there she was, Candace, sitting at the far end like a queen on her throne, chin high, smile smug. She held a glass of wine in one manicured hand, nails painted bright red, and her eyes narrowed the second they landed on me. "What are you doing here?" she spat, voice sharp enough to make the cousins glance up in surprise. "I told you to leave." "You are not welcome." I didn't flinch. I stepped into that dining room with the calm of a woman who knows she holds the truth. My heels clicked on the floor, my purse swinging steady at my side. I could feel every eye in the room waiting, unsure what storm had just walked in. "Good afternoon, everybody," I said, voice strong, warm, but carrying iron beneath it. "Merry Christmas." The cousins muttered quick, "Merry Christmas is back," uncertain. Jasmine half rose from her chair, ready to run into my arms, but Marcus laid a hand on her shoulder, holding her down gently. His eyes were pleading, tired. He looked at me like a man caught between two walls closing in. Candace slammed her glass down on the table. I said, "Why are you here? Did you not understand me last night?" "You don't live here anymore." I walked right up to that table, slow and deliberate, and set my handbag down in the middle. The sound of it landing cut through the room like a drumbeat. I kept my hands resting on it a moment, eyes sweeping over every face. "Candace," I said finally, calm as a river before it floods, "baby, this house don't belong to you. And it sure don't belong to my son." I placed one hand on the zipper of my purse, fingers steady despite the pounding of my heart. "Let me show you something." I unzipped my handbag slow, letting the sound of the metal teeth scratch across the silence until every eye in that room was fixed on my hands. My fingers found the photo album first, old leather soft from decades of turning pages. I laid it on the table like I was laying down a family Bible. Then I slipped 2 folded papers from its back sleeve and set them on top, smoothing the creases with my palm. "Nah," Candace scoffed, but her voice faltered just a thread. "What is this, some sentimental scrapbook?" "We're eating." "Nobody's eating," I said gently without looking up. "Not just yet." The cousins straightened. Jasmine's breath hitched. Isaiah leaned forward, elbows on the table, his eyes big and bright with something he didn't have words for yet. Marcus sat like he'd been carved from the chair, shoulders hunched, jaw clenched, caught between past and present like it was a tug-of-war rope shredding in his hands. "These papers," I said, tapping the top sheet, "been sleeping safe in my house longer than you've been wearing high heels, Candace. They carry more weight than your loud voice and your rolled eyes." I slid the first page toward the center, angled so everyone could see. "This here is the original warranty deed to this property, signed by me and my husband, Earl Johnson, witnessed and filed. There is a particular hush that falls on a room when truth arrives." The clink of utensils went quiet. The Christmas lights hummed a small electric hymn. I could even hear the soft breath of my grandbabies. Candace leaned forward, snatched the page before I could stop her, and held it between 2 fingers like it might dirty her manicure. She scanned it, blinked fast, and then laughed, too high, too thin. "That's cute," she said. "Adorable. But fake." She flipped it back onto the table, careless. "People can print anything off the internet now." I saw a TikTok. Marcus flinched. His eyes kept darting from the paper to my face like he needed me to give him permission to believe what he'd always known. "Sweetheart," I said calmly, meeting Candace's gaze, "that there ain't a printout. That's the paper that sat in my top drawer since 1984. And this?" I slid the second paper forward, a neat notarized letter on Mr. Byrne. Daniels's letterhead. "This is a certification from my attorney of record. Been my lawyer longer than you've been alive." She opened her mouth to spit more noise, but the doorbell rang. One clear chime, cutting through the room like a bell at the end of a school day. Everyone startled, everyone but me. I kept my hands folded and nodded toward Isaiah. "Baby, be a dear and open the door." Isaiah hopped down, grateful to move, and ran to the hallway. A second later, footsteps crossed the entry. "Mr. Daniels filled the doorway of the dining room, tall and unhurried in his dark coat, glasses low on his nose, a leather folio tucked beneath his arm. Behind him, Miss Ruth and Mr. Ease. Ellis from across the street slid in quiet as church deacons. The McRaes from the corner peered from the hall, hats still on their heads, faces sober. Witnesses, all of them. Neighbors who'd seen everything last night, neighbors who would not be tricked by smooth talk today. Mr. Baber. Daniels tipped his chin. Afternoon, folks. Merry Christmas. Candace shot to her feet, the chair legs scraping. Who invited you? I did, I answered. This is my attorney, Mr. Daniels. He's here to verify what these papers say. Mr. Daniels didn't hurry. He approached the table, opened his folio, and pulled out a slim stack. For the record, he said, setting his papers beside mine, I hold the original filed copy of the warranty deed for this property, recorded under Book 339, page 20 records. Owner of record, Mrs. Thelma Mae Johnson. No subsequent deed transferring title has ever been executed or recorded. He looked over his glasses at Candace, his voice even. Which means, ma'am, that whatever domestic arrangements you imagined were in place do not include ownership, tenancy rights, or any claim against this house. A low murmur rolled through the cousins. Jasmine's mouth fell open like she'd just seen a magic trick. Isaiah, bless him, whispered, That means it's Grandma's. Candace laughed again, brittle as icicles. This is a setup, a whole performance. She looked at Marcus, heat blazing in her eyes. You knew about this? You knew, and you let your mother humiliate me like this in front of your family? Marcus's mouth moved, but no sound came at first. His gaze stuck to the deed as if it were an old photograph come to life. I didn't know, he managed, voice rough. I swear I didn't, Candy. Mama never. He turned to me, pleading. You never told me. I met his eyes and saw my little boy there, the one who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. I told you once, I said softly. You were 15 and grieving, and your daddy made me promise to keep the papers in my name. The promise wasn't against you, baby. It was for you, for us. Candace slapped her palm on the table. For him? That's a lie. This whole house, everything you kept it to control him. To control us. To make me feel small. She pointed at the deed like it had insulted her personally. It's fake. It has to be fake. Mr. Daniels slid a second certification forward. Calm as you please. You're welcome to accompany me to the clerk's office tomorrow and pull the book yourself, he said. Public record. Or I can email you a certified copy right now. He lifted his phone and tapped. But if the concern is immediate, he turned to me. Mrs. Johnson, do you want me to read the specific language? I nodded once. Please. He cleared his throat. The premises described herein are conveyed to Thelma Mae Johnson, her heirs and assigns forever, free and clear of encumbrances, except as herein stated. He glanced up. Which, to be explicit, means the house is hers. Candace's face flushed dark. She knocked her wineglass over and didn't notice the red spreading across the white tablecloth like a stain you can't ever get out. Wanks. No, no, no. She spun on Marcus, voice rising. So what now? You going to let her throw us out? You going to let your mommy run your life like you're still a baby? Say something. Marcus's hands were shaking. He stood too fast, his chair skidding back, and put both palms on the table as if to steady the world. Candy, he said, voice breaking around the nickname, don't talk to her like that. For a heartbeat, you could have heard a fork drop 3 houses down. I kept my seat. The goal wasn't to crush my son beneath this moment, it was to help him see the truth and stand up inside it. Marcus, I said quietly, look at me. He did. And I saw shame and love and confusion, all of it warring behind his eyes. Mama, he whispered, I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I thought, he swallowed. I thought when you said the house was paid off, that meant it was ours, I assumed. I never asked. I know, I said, and that's on me as much as it's on you. Grief was heavy then. We got through the days we could. I laid a hand on the photo album. Earl looked up from the cover like an old friend. But hear me now, I didn't keep this to lord it over you. I kept it because your daddy asked me to keep you safe. Paper keeps families safe when feelings go wild. And feelings done gone wild in here. Candace let out a harsh sound. Safe? You call this safe? She gestured to the neighbors in the doorway like we were performing in a theater. You dragged an audience into my home on Christmas Day. You embarrassed me, she jabbed a finger at Ruth. You brought that old gossip and the whole block to humiliate me. Ruth didn't raise her voice, but her words landed like a gavel. We came as witnesses, she said, because we watched you put a 72-year-old woman out in the cold last night. On Christmas Eve. A murmur of agreement rose from the hall, Mr. Ellis's deep hum, the McCrae's quiet, Mr. Wrist? Daniels lifted a hand, bringing order without force. No one is here to humiliate you, ma'am. We're here to clarify the facts so there's no more confusion or cruelty. He looked at Marcus again, steady. Mr. Ennie. Johnson, your mother is the owner. You and your wife have been her guests. That's not an insult. That's a blessing you should acknowledge. Marcus's face crumpled like paper in rain. Mama, he said, and the word escaped him on a sob he tried to hide. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He sank back into his chair and covered his face with his hands. Jasmine slipped out of her seat and went to him, little arms wrapping his waist like a belt of mercy. Isaiah stood beside them, chin up like a tiny soldier guarding a broken captain. Candace stared, stunned, as if the room had betrayed her. Then her shock hardened into rage. You're weak, she hissed at Marcus. You always have been, hiding behind your mother and her casseroles and her church songs, letting her make every decision. She swung on me. And you? You manipulator? You could have given us this house years ago. You could have put our names on the title, but you held it like a leash. My voice stayed soft. I held it like a foundation, so my grandbabies would never be outside in the cold because two grown folks forgot their manners. She laughed through her nose. Manners? You want to talk about manners after you crashed my Christmas dinner with a lawyer in a peanut gallery? I folded my hands, let the quiet stretch just long enough to pull the venom from the air. Your dinner? I asked. Whose oven baked that ham? Whose hands seasoned those greens? Who stitched the stockings on that mantle? Whose husband built that bookshelf in the corner? I pointed to the photo of Earl and me on top of it, a younger me leaning into his shoulder, joy bright as morning, you living in a history you didn't write. You thought you could erase the author just by shouting. Her chest rose and fell like she had run a race. She spun back to Mr. Furster. Daniels, so what now? She kicks me out and I just go with my children? With my life in boxes on Christmas? Mr. Daniels kept his tone professional, but there was a warning in it. No one here wants to harm your children, he said. But we are here to end harm against Mrs. Johnson. The law is clear. If Mrs. Johnson asks you to vacate, you will need to do so. If you need a few days to arrange a dignified exit, I will advise my client accordingly. But any further harassment or attempted removal of Mrs. Johnson from her own home will result in immediate legal action, including an emergency protective order. Candace's eyes flashed, a trapped animal's panic sparking behind all that polish. I see what this is, she said. You all formed a circle around her and shut me out. She looked to the cousins, seeking allies. They wouldn't meet her gaze. She stared down the neighbors. They stared back with the long memory of a block that has seen both kindness and cruelty and knows the difference. Jasmine tugged Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, she whispered, Grandma can stay, right? That little voice cracked something open in him. He lowered his hands and looked at his daughter and then at me. Mama, he said again, the word fuller this time, rooted. I'm sorry. For last night. For a lot. He turned to Candace, voice steadying by degrees. She stays. Candace recoiled as if slapped. "You choose her over me? I choose right over wrong," he said, quiet but firm. And throwing my mother out on Christmas Eve was wrong. The room breathed, just one shared inhale, surprised, relieved, afraid of what might come next. Candace's lips flattened to a knife-thin line. Then she smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. "Oh, I see. You think this is over because the church lawyer read a piece of paper." She glanced at the tree, at the photographs, at the mantle lined with stockings that bore names she didn't speak anymore. Her voice dropped low, almost a purr. "You have no idea what I can do." I felt the hairs lift on my arms. "What does that mean?" She turned that smile on me, and it glittered like frost on a step you don't see until you've slipped. "It means you've all made your little choice, and I'm about to make mine." She reached for her phone with hands that didn't shake, tapped fast, then lifted her chin. "Maybe this house is yours on paper, Thelma, but paper burns. Houses burn. Reputations burn. Ask yourself how much you're willing to lose." The cousins gasped. Ruth took a step forward, hand out like she could catch the words mid-air and crush them. Mr. Daniels's eyes hardened, and he moved closer to me without making a show of it. Marcus's face went white. "Candace," he said, breathless. "What are you doing?" She slid the phone into her pocket like she'd just placed a bet she intended to win. "Whatever it takes," she said softly. "Whatever it takes to make sure none of you forget who you're dealing with." The Christmas lights flickered once, as if the house itself shivered. And in that charged quiet right there between truth and the next terrible thing, I realized we were not done. Not by a long shot. The room felt like a pot about to boil over, steam rising, silence heavy, every eye waiting to see what came next. My heart beat strong but steady. I rose to my feet, squared my shoulders, and laid both palms flat on the table. "This is my house," I said, voice cutting through the air like a church bell on Sunday morning. "And you will respect me in it, or you will leave." Candace froze, her smile twitching at the edges. The words hung in the room, undeniable. She opened her mouth, but before she could twist them into something ugly, Mr. Daniels stepped forward. "You heard her, ma'am," he said firmly. "Mrs. Johnson is the sole legal owner of this property. Effective immediately, I am advising that you vacate. You are trespassing the moment she says so." The cousins gasped. The neighbors in the hallway murmured. Candace's eyes darted around the room, looking for someone, anyone, to back her up. Marcus stared at his hands, shame dragging his head low. But then I pointed toward the door. "Get your bags," I said, my voice firm but not cruel. "I won't have any more poison at this table." Candace sputtered, turning red. "You can't. On Christmas, this is ridiculous." But Mr. Daniels calmly pulled a folded form from his folio. "Ma'am, if you refuse, I'll be forced to call law enforcement, and they'll remove you." "Your choice." Neighbors leaned in from the doorway, their eyes sharp, their whispers cutting. Laws on Thelma's side? Should have never crossed her. With her face burning, Candace stormed upstairs. Drawers banged. Hangers clattered. Within minutes, she dragged 2 suitcases down the stairs, her heels snapping loud against the wood. She stomped to the door, but before leaving, she whipped around, eyes blazing. "You'll regret this," she spat, but her voice cracked. "Every last one of you will." And then she was gone, out the door, down the porch steps, dragging her pride behind her like those heavy bags. Neighbors outside folded their arms, watching, not lifting a hand to help. Candace's final humiliation was complete. Silence fell in the house. Marcus stayed seated, shoulders shaking. Finally, he looked up at me with tears brimming. "Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her long before it came to this. I was weak. Please forgive me." I took a breath, steadying myself. "Baby," I said gently, "I raised you to be strong, but even strong men can lose their way. What matters is finding it again." Before Marcus could reply, little arms wrapped tight around my waist. Jasmine pressed her cheek to me, sobbing. Isaiah clung to my hip, his small voice fierce. "Grandma, don't ever leave again." I bent down, hugging them both close, my tears falling warm into their hair. "I'm not going anywhere, babies. This is Grandma's house. It's your safe place, always." Around us, the family exhaled. Neighbors smiled. Even Marcus let out a ragged breath like chains had slipped from his chest. The Christmas lights glowed steady, the ham still steamed on the table. But the real feast was this: respect returned, dignity restored, truth shining brighter than tinsel. For the first time in years, I felt whole again. The villain was gone, my house was mine. And my family, broken but not beyond repair, held tight to me in the center of it all. The house felt different after Candace left, lighter somehow, as if the very walls had exhaled. I could walk through the rooms without bracing for her sharp tongue, without feeling like a guest in my own space. The air seemed cleaner, the laughter freer, the silence kinder. For the first time in a long while, I felt like home belonged to me again, not just on paper but in spirit. That following Sunday, I rose early, tied on my apron, and filled the kitchen with the smells that had carried me through decades: cornbread baking golden in the skillet, greens simmering with smoked turkey, sweet potato pie cooling on the counter. I basted a roast chicken till the skin gleamed crisp and brown, and I hummed "Blessed Assurance" while I moved between the stove and the sink. By noon, the house rang with the sound of footsteps and laughter as my church friends arrived, their arms full of pound cake and potato salad. We gathered in the dining room, the same room where shame had tried to plant itself weeks earlier. But this time, the space overflowed with love. We bowed our heads while Pastor Green prayed, his deep voice wrapping us in comfort. When the amen rolled around the table, we lifted our forks and let joy in through every bite. Ruth caught my eye and winked. I smiled back, grateful beyond words. Later, when the dishes were stacked and the kitchen clean, I settled on my porch with a glass of sweet tea. The sun was warm for winter, casting golden stripes across the yard. Isaiah and Jasmine played tag on the grass, their laughter carrying like music. Jasmine's braids flew behind her as she ran, and Isaiah's sneakers kicked up little puffs of dust. Every so often, they'd glance back at me, making sure Grandma was watching. Neighbors strolled by, stopping to chat. Mr. Ellis leaned on the fence and said, "Thelma, you showed us all what it means to stand tall." Miss Ruth lowered herself into the rocker beside me, her voice low with pride. "You reminded everybody on this block, never underestimate a praying woman." I sipped my tea, rocking slow, letting their words settle in my chest. I couldn't have done it alone, I told them. Took faith, took friends, took a whole community watching truth win out. The betrayal still hurt when I thought on it. The memory of Candace's voice telling me to leave, Marcus's silence cutting deeper than any insult, but healing had begun. Marcus came by more often now, his face softer, his words gentler. He never sat long, still weighed down by guilt, but he always hugged me tight before leaving, whispering, "I love you, Mama." I believed him. Forgiveness takes time, but love lays the foundation. As I watched the children race through the yard, my heart swelled with quiet triumph. The storm had passed, and what remained was stronger than before. I thought of Earl, of the promise I kept, of the night I knelt beside my bed and begged God for strength. He had carried me through, just as he always had. "This is still my house," I whispered, though no one else could hear. Built on love, faith, and endurance, and as long as I draw breath, it'll stay that way. The breeze lifted my scarf, the porch creaked beneath my chair, and laughter rose high into the afternoon sky. Life had tested me, but I was still standing, rooted, resilient, and unshakable. And oh, how sweet peace felt when it finally came home. As I sit here tonight, the house quiet and warm, I think about all that's happened. Betrayal cuts deep, especially when it comes from your own family, but it doesn't have the power to break you unless you let it. I learned that the hard way. What Candace meant for humiliation turned into my moment of strength. I want you to remember something, baby. Never mistake kindness for weakness. We elders might move a little slower, our hands might shake when we fold laundry or stir the pot, but our spirits? They are strong as oak. Respect your elders, because one day you'll be one too. I don't hold hate in my heart, but I do hold boundaries. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, it means standing tall in truth and refusing to be erased. If this story touched you, like the video and subscribe for more family stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your voice too.